Are you looking for ways to strengthen your marriage? Would you like to raise children you enjoy being around? Do you long for a peaceful, orderly home that's a blessing to everyone who comes through its doors? Then you've come to the right place. I'm Jennifer Flanders, a Bible-believing, homeschooling mother to 12 and host of the Loving Life at Home podcast. Join me as we discover what God's Word has to say about marriage, motherhood, and minding the things that matter most.
Hello, friend. Welcome to episode 76 of Loving Life at Home. Today is Monday, February 17th. We are just coming off Valentine's weekend, so I thought this would be a great time to talk about perseverance. My husband had a 24-hour call on Valentine's Day, so the two of us celebrated a day late on the 15th, which also happens to be National Singles Awareness Day. Did you know that? For years, I've been getting requests from readers and listeners who've asked me to make one of my free printable prayer guides for singles. They felt at a loss to even know how to pray for themselves or for their unmarried friends or sons or daughters, especially the daughters who often deeply long to be married but just haven't found a suitable guy who is interested in building a life with them. And these people were hoping that I could suggest some kind of biblically based prayers for them to pray on behalf of the singles that they know and love. So I finally got that done this year, and I posted it on Saturday just in time for Singles Day. I'll be sure to link it in the show notes in case you're interested in printing a copy for yourself or for a single someone that you know. I have 4 daughters and 3 sons that fit into that category. One of my boys already has a steady girlfriend, and one of my daughters is still way too young to date. But the rest of these older teens and young adults would love to meet a devoted Christian with similar goals who'd be interested in getting married and starting a family with them. So this prayer guide features some of the prayers that I pray for them. Now, on the day before Valentine's for the past several years, my middle daughter, Rebecca, has hosted what she calls a Galentine's party for a bunch of her single friends. She cooks them dinner and reminds them that even if they don't have a husband or a sweetheart to spend Valentine's with, that doesn't mean they aren't loved, because she loves all of them, and even more importantly, Jesus loves them so much that he gave his life to pay the price for their sin. He died, was buried, rose again, so that they could have everlasting life in heaven with him. Each year she quotes a verse or two about God's great love for us. This year it was John 3:16. Then she prays over her friends and over dinner. Then after everybody's eaten, she clears away all the dishes and brings out 4 or 5 huge bucket loads of flowers that she's carted home from Trader Joe's in Dallas, as well as dozens of different jars and vases and other containers, and we all design our own floral arrangements. She lets me come too, and a couple of other moms, even though we're married. She had about 25 ladies in attendance this year, and there were plenty of flowers for all of us to make several bouquets, one to keep and 1 or 2 others to share with other single friends that we know. This Galentine's party is a lovely tradition, and I'm so glad my daughter does it, but it wasn't until this year that I realized she didn't just make up that word or the event. There's actually a global holiday for celebrating female friendship called Galentine's Day, or Valentine's Day if you're a guy who wants to celebrate all your buddies. It's on February 13th, the day before Valentine's. Now, being single, especially when you don't want to be, takes a special kind of perseverance, but that's not the perseverance I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the perseverance that's required to keep married love vibrant and thriving, not like some bright bouquet of flowers that may look beautiful in the beginning, but eventually wilts and fades over time. We want our marriage relationship to be more like a hardy tree that gets bigger and stronger with every passing year. I met a woman who has that kind of marriage just last week at the 70th birthday party of a mutual friend. I liked her instantly, and she later texted me a sweet message about how much she enjoyed meeting me and my husband. And in the text, she wished us a happy Valentine's Day and shared a poem that she had written for her husband over a decade ago. As somebody who's written lots of poems for my own husband over the years, I'll try to link a few of those in the show notes today as well. Reading what she'd written made me like her even more. So I wrote her back and wished her a happy Valentine's Day as well, to which she immediately replied, "Just think, it could be every day." That's the kind of perseverance I'm talking about. And that is definitely a philosophy that my husband and I share. Back when I was in high school, I may have told this story on the podcast before, I can't remember, but I'm going to tell it again because it illustrates my point so nicely. But when I was a senior in high school, I dated a boy who went all out for Valentine's Day. Long-stemmed red roses, boxes of chocolate, candlelight dinners, a bouquet of 75 red helium balloons, you name it. Every day for a full week, some grand new token of his affection would be delivered to my doorstep. But then Valentine's Day would be over, and that would be that. 2 years older and away at college, he would go entire semesters without so much as a phone call or a postcard to me. Granted, this was before cell phones, and to reach me by telephone at that time, he had to call the college switchboard, who'd patch him through to the phone at the end of the hall of my dorm floor, which would ring, and if anyone were around to hear it, they might answer, they might not, and then they'd come knock on my door to see if I were in my room, in which case I'd walk to the end of the hall and talk to my boyfriend. That's admittedly a huge hassle, so as an adult, I can understand why he didn't do it very often. But first-class postage back then was only 20 cents, so he could have sent me some letters in those months between Valentine's Days, but he didn't, which was ultimately for the best because we both ended up finding spouses much better suited to our individual personalities. But at the time, that 51 weeks of silence stung. And the stark contrast between the over-attention that I got the week of Valentine's and the complete non-communication I endured for the rest of the year gave me a little bit of a jaded view towards all things Cupid. In my mind, Valentine's Day is just window dressing. It's a public display that may or may not accurately reflect what is stored up in one's heart. Our most telling declarations of love aren't made on February 14th. They are made in the days and weeks and months that follow. When my husband brings home heart-shaped candy boxes and fancy flowers this time of year, I know that it's at least partially because he knows the nurses at the hospital are going to quiz him about what he got me. But when he brings me a cup of hot tea when I'm sick, or starts a load of laundry for me when I'm busy, or runs my bath water when I'm tired, or makes a list at work of things he wants to tell me when he gets home, he's not doing any of that for show. Nobody will ever ask him about it. He does those things purely because he loves me, and he takes pleasure in demonstrating that fact in practical, everyday ways. He does an amazing job of living out Romans 12:10, which tells us, "Be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves." I love that about my husband. Of course, wives can be just as guilty as men of pouring so much thought and energy into a single day that little is left over for later. About 25 years ago, our family was attending a week-long Christian camp. I'll never forget this because my parents had come with us that year, and every morning while the kids were doing outdoor activities with their camp counselors, the adults would listen to Bible teachers. But on this particular morning, they decided to split up the husbands and wives into separate groups in order to have a frank discussion about sex. And the woman who was there to address the wives urged us to make times of intimacy a feast for our husband's senses. She suggested we light candles and play soft music and sprinkle our sheets with perfume and slip into some beautiful negligee and really make it an evening to remember, something akin to a 5-star gourmet meal. And honestly, I don't see anything wrong with a wife giving her husband a feast for his senses. But I did take issue with what the speaker said next, which was to claim that by putting so much thought and preparation into this special evening with your spouse, he'd be perfectly content to wait a couple of weeks before you needed to do it again. I knew for a fact that 2 weeks without sex would have been harder on my husband than 11 months of radio silence had been on me between Valentine's Days. So I raised my hand to challenge the speaker on this point. It's funny you should compare this feast for the senses with a gourmet meal, I told her, because I personally love gourmet food, but my husband doesn't. He just can't get full on 2 thin slices of pork medallion artfully arranged on a plate with 3 green beans. He'd starve if all he got was a sporadic sampling of gourmet delicacies. He'd much rather have plain old-fashioned meat and potatoes every single night than one 5-star dinner every 2 weeks. The other young women seemed surprised that I would speak so openly with my own mother sitting right next to me, but she happily backed me up and confirmed that what I was saying was true. So, if you enjoyed an extra special evening of romance with your husband on the 14th, terrific. Just don't expect that single interlude to carry him over until next Valentine's Day. or even until next week. Sometimes when a wife breaks out the candles and perfume and background music and lacy negligees, she, like that camp speaker, is tempted to afterward think, wow, I really outdid myself tonight. That should tide my husband over for at least a week or two. Meanwhile, her husband's thinking, wow, that was amazing. We need to do that more often. How about tomorrow? So this is a plea for perseverance. Did you kindle some sparks this weekend? Don't let them grow cold. Fan them into a flame and keep them burning all year long.
Thanks so much for listening today. If you have a question you'd like to hear covered on this podcast, message me on Instagram at Flanders_family or contact me through my website, lovinglifeathome.com. Before you go, if you've been encouraged by something you've heard on the show, do me a favor and forward the link to a friend or head over to Loving Life at Home on Apple iTunes to subscribe and leave a written review of the show. Your doing so will help others find me so they can listen too. Until next time, I pray the Lord will bless your efforts to build a loving home life centered on Him.